Hey Cheva, what's going on? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Tzadi Tes, Daf 99 of Masechta Ayruvin. A whole bunch of very Ayruvin-y kind of things. Man, I have a feeling that we're going to be in kind of Ayruvin-y kind of mode until we make our siyum in a few days. I'll go upon him. So we're going to have 4 Mishnayos today. Talk a shtickle about peeing, spitting, drinking, and putting stuff in pits and gathering water and stuff. Let's go weiter. So we're on Daf Tzadi Tes Amud Aleph, 2 lines into the page. Uvavad shelo yotzi chutz. So we said that you're allowed to stand in Rishus HaYachid and kind of, move things around in Rishus HaRabim, as long as you don't move them more than 4 amis. Hotzi chayev chatas. But if he does move these things more than 4 amis, well then he will be chayev a korban chatas. So let's say that this supports Rava. That Rava says, if you move something 4 amis, but the entire time you are holding it above your head, i.e. above 10 tfachim, right? So you pick it up in Rishus HaRabim, and then you lift it over your head, over 10 tfachim, i.e. in a makom p'tur, and you walk it 4 amas and you put it down. So says Rava that you are chayiv for that, even though you're passing it through makom p'tur. Now the assumption is over here that if you're in Rishus HaYachid, it's because you're on some kind of platform that is 10 tfachim tall and 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim wide, and you're picking up something with Rishus HaRabim, and then lifting it up to your height where you are, and then putting it down as 4 amas away in Rishus. You're picking up something with Rishus HaRabim, you're in Rishus HaYachid, then you move it 4 amas and you put it down in Rishus HaRabim. So basically it's traveling through makom p'tur, and we're saying that you know, as long as you don't do more than 4 amas, and we want to assume that what that means is that if you do more than 4 amas, then you will be chayav korban chatas, and therefore that supports Rava. Mikatani emotzi chayav chatas, dilma emotzi pater aval aser. To which the Gemara says, not so fast. It doesn't explicitly say in our Mishnah that if you move this item more than 4 amas, you're going to be chayav korban chatas. It just says don't do it more than 4 amas. Maybe if you do it more than 4 amas, you'll be pater aval aser. And it's not clear, so it's not a clear proof for Rava. Ikadamri, that those who say hahotzi pater aval aser, or the way you can understand the Mishnah is don't move this thing 4 amas in Rishus HaRabim, and if you do, it's pater aval aser. Leimet have tiyufta to Rava. In which case, and now you could say that it's dafka a question on Rava. Because Rava says that if you move something 4 amas in Rishus HaRabim and you lift it over your head, i.e. in a makom p'tur over 10 tfachim the whole time, he says you're going to be chayiv. And over here we're saying that it's only pater aval aser. So the Gemara answers, Mikatani hotzi pater aval aser, dilmaim hotzi chayiv chatos. It doesn't say explicitly in the Mishnah that if he goes more than 4 amas, it's pater aval aser. Maybe it means that he's chayiv korban chatos, and it's a support for Rava. So basically it's inconclusive if this supports Rava or not. Continues the Gemara, quoting the Mishnah, Lo yamur adam b'Rishus HaYachid v'chulei. A person should not stand in Rishus HaYachid and pee into Rishus HaRabim. Amar Rav Yosef, Hishtin v'rok chayav chatas. If a person pees or spits from one Rishus to another, is chayav korban chatas. Don't do it. But 1 second. In order to be chayev, you would have to have an akira and a hanacha and a place that's 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim. And over here you don't, because the akira is somewhere in your body, and I guess that somewhere in your body is less than 4 tfachim. Alright? Machshavtu mishabile, so the Gemara answers, Machshavtu mishabile makom. So just your intention is able to make it 4 tfachim. Significant. Because if you don't say like this, that if somebody throws something and it lands in a dog's mouth or in the opening to a furnace, he's chayav a korban chatos. But we need the thing to land on something that's 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, and a dog's mouth or the opening to a furnace wouldn't be 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim. So why are you chayiv? Because his intention to have it land over there is enough to make it significant, and therefore you'll be chayiv. So here also, when he's peeing or when he's spitting, even though where it's originating from is not 4 tfachim, nonetheless, his intention to do it, I guess, is what makes it significant, and you'll be chayiv. By Rava. So Rava asked an interesting question. Hu b'shus hayachid ufi ama b'shus harabim. Mao. So, interesting question. If he is in Rishus hayachid, but his penis is in Rishus harabim, all right. Basar akira azlinan or basar yitzia azlinan. So, do we go based on the akira, right? That it's that the pee originates in your body from Rishus hayachid, or we say, well, your penis is in Rishus harabim, so therefore maybe it goes based on where the urine actually leaves your body, which is in Rishus harabim. What do you guys think? The Gemara wants to know what you think because Teku. They don't know. Vaiter v'chen lo yaruk. Similarly, do not spit from Rishus hayachid to Rishus harabim. Rabbi Yehuda Omer v'chulei. Rabbi Yehuda says that even if you're gonna spit, then you can't walk Daled Amos, right? If you have spit in your mouth, so then you can't walk Daled Amos. Afagav lo hafich ba. So the Gemara just wants to know, even though you didn't swish the spit around your mouth, very beautiful imagery. V'atnan, but we learned in the Mishnah, what if a person is eating figs, and the figs are truma, and he didn't wash his hands? And of course we know from Masechta Brachos that Yadayim Shnios, right, Stam Yadayim Shnios, saying that your hands are considered Sheni L'Tuma, and Sheni L'Tuma can make a Shlishi by Truma, as we're going to learn 2 weeks into Masechta Psachim, Chevre. We're all very excited for Masechta Psachim. It's going to be amazing. The rest of Ayruvin, of course, is also going to be amazing. But we're all very excited for Masechta Psachim. Well, let me tell you something. 2 weeks into Masechta Psachim, there we get to a Mishnah that's called Reb Chanina Skana Kohanim. And over there's a week full of Tumah and Tyra, like mamish, serious Tumah and Tyra. So I just want to get you all excited for that. But Akopanim, don't be nervous. Psachim is a beautiful Masechta. Let's go weiter. Akopanim. So this Cheverman, he is eating Truma, Mistami Zakoin. He's eating figs that are Truma. And his hands are Shneos Letuma. And the thing is, of course, as we know, that in order for something to become Mukhshel Lekabel Tuma, by the way, we haven't had much Tuma in Masechta Ayruvin. Shabbos had a lot of Tuma that was very difficult. Masechta, every Masechta is difficult in its own way. Shabbos had lots of Tumah and Tyra, which is very difficult. Ayruvin didn't have very much Tumah and Tyra, but it had a lot of Ayruvin. Akoponim. So, take 3. So, in order for something to be able to become Tameh, it has to come in contact with water. Now, if these figs had never come in contact with water, so when he touches them, they don't become Tameh. Now, he's chewing them, and of course in his mouth is saliva. So, and then he sticks his finger into his mouth to take out some kind of, stone, pebble, something's in his mouth, he wants to take it out. So now what happens is that once the figs were in his mouth, so they interacted with saliva. So the question is that saliva now machshir the figs to become tameh, which means that when he sticks his hands in his mouth and touches the figs, will they now become tameh? And then there'll be truma tameh, which is a problem. You can't eat that. So Rav Meir matame. So Rav Meir says, yeah, it's a problem. The figs will be tameh. Rabbi Yossi matayr. Rabbi Yossi says, no, the fact of the matter is that spit is considered part of your body. And if it's part of your body, so then it will not be machshir these figs the kabel tuma. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, look, it depends. Hipech ba tameh, lo hipech ba tar. If he swished the spit around his mouth, so then it would be considered separate from his body. But if he didn't swish the spit around his mouth, so then it will still be considered connected to his body, and it will not be machshir l'kabel tuma. So if he swishes it around his mouth, then it will be machshir l'kabel tuma. If he doesn't swish it around, then it will not be machshir l'kabel tuma. Rabbi Yochanan muchlefes hashita. So the question is that when it comes to this truma, Rabbi Yehuda is dafka saying that it's only considered separate from your body if you swish it around. Yeah, in our Mishnah it seems to be saying, the implication is even if he doesn't swish it around, just the fact that there's spit in his mouth, he's not going to be able to move until you can't walk Daled Amos until he does something about it. I think the article had a very interesting word. They I guess they didn't want to use the word spit, so they said to I can't remember. It was like a very funny word. Honestly, I think they just should have said spit. I mean, everyone knows what that is. Not everybody knows. It's like expectorate, maybe. So I think they said something like, you shouldn't walk 4 amos without expectorating it first. Why don't you say spit? Let's go weiter. So Rabbi Yochanan says Muchlef is a shita. So Rabbi Yochanan says that they that it changed. That initially Rabbi Yehuda held that even if the spit is just in your mouth, even if you didn't swish it around, so it would be considered separate and it would be a problem. You'd have to spit it out on Shabbos. But then he changed his mind. Changed his opinion and said you'd have to swish it around. Okay. Rish Lakish Amar La'olam Lo Tachlif. Rish Lakish says, no, don't switch it around. He means what he says, but V'achav Ma'askinim B'kicho. Our Mishnah is talking about phlegm. So there's an afkamina between spit and phlegm. So spit, you would have to swish it around for it to be considered separate. Phlegm, once already you get it in your mouth, it's considered separate. You don't have to swish it around. Baruch Hashem. But we learn in a brisa. Now this brisa is a little bit weird. It doesn't make too much sense. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Kicho v'nitlash. Rabbi Yehuda says that his phlegm and it gets, meaning and it's in his mouth, even if he doesn't swish it around. My lav rok v'nitlash. So mistama, that means spit that's in your mouth. And we're saying that it's you wouldn't be allowed to walk Daled Amos. Lo Kicho v'nitlash. No, it means what it says. It says his phlegm. So it's talking about phlegm. V'atani Rabbi Yehuda Omer Kicho v'chein roko shnitlash. But we have a brisa that says his phlegm, but also his spit. Once it's in his mouth, it's going to be considered separate from his body, and he won't be able to walk unless he spits it out first, unless he expectorates it first. So, right, lo yalech daled amos ad sheyaruk. So rather, it's going to be hard to explain like Rish Lakish, because we do have this brisa which is saying that even spit, you would have to expectorate it, even if you didn't swish it around your mouth first. So rather it makes more sense to say, like Rabbi Yochanan, to say that, look, yeah, that brisa is true. The brisa does say that the spit, even if it's just in his mouth, you would have to spit it out first. But Rabbi Yehuda ultimately changed his mind to say that he would have to swish it around before it would be considered separate, and he would have to expectorate it. Amr Rish Lakish says, Rish Lakish, Kiach b'fnei Rabo chayv misa. If a person has phlegm in front of his Rebbe, so he's chayv misa. Shneimar, as it says, Kol misanai ahavu mavis. All those who hate me love death. Atukei misanai ela masniai. Don't read it misanai, those who hate me, rather those who make other people hate me. This was a Gemara that we saw this in Masechta Shabbos and Daf Kuf Yud Daled about dressing properly. That you shouldn't look like what did we say? A zhlub? No, you shouldn't look like a. We talked about it. Shouldn't look like a. I can't remember the word I used. All right, I'll go upon him. So viha minas honest, right? So meaning we don't want you, hawking loogies and stuff. That's not how a ben Torah should act. We want you to make a kiddush Hashem. So, but one second, if he has phlegm, he's got phlegm. So kiach v'ra kamin. We don't mean that just if he has phlegm, but if he has phlegm and he spits it and makes a whole scene, so then he's chayiv misa, because he's not representing the Torah very favorably. Chevenu Mishnah, lo yamud adam b'shus hayachid v'yishta b'shus harabim. A person should not stand in Rishus hayachid and drink in Rishus harabim, right? So if he's in Rishus hayachid and there is like a some water in Rishus, he's in Rishus hayachid, there's some water in Rishus harabim, so and there's like some kli there, don't like fill up the kli in Rishus harabim and then bring your head into Rishus harabim and drink it over there, because we're concerned that you might end up bringing the kli to where you are in Rishus hayachid. Rishus harabim v'yishta b'Rishus hayachid. Don't do vice versa. If you're in Rishus harabim, don't be drinking Rishus hayachid. Ela im kein hichnis rosh of ruba l'makom shu shoseh v'chein begas, unless he brings his head and most of his body to where he is drinking, right? So if he's standing in Rishus harabim and the water is in Rishus hayachid and he brings his head and most of his body into the if he's in Rishus hayachid, so he brings his head and most of his body into Rishus harabim, so then that would be acceptable. V'chein begas, and similarly by a wine press. And we're going to explain what this means by a wine press. Is machlokas Abaye and Rave. This lemaisa cheve. This is the second time we're seeing this. As far as I can remember, we saw it in towards the beginning of Masechta Shabbos and Daf Yud Aleph of Masechta Shabbos. Reb Josh Fleet commented on that Gemara, and he talked about from his experience working at wineries that the grape juice can be very, very sweet at that stage, and we'll get there in a few minutes. Reisha Rabbanon v'Sefer Meir, the Gemara asks, wait a second, the Reisha is the Rabbanon, right? We said that yesterday. The rabbis said that right, this opinion that you could be standing with Rishus hayachid and move things around in Rishus harabim as long as you don't move them more than 4 amos. Yet over here we're saying that you would be unable to stand in Rishus HaYachid and drink in Rishus HaRabim. So it sounds like this is like Reb Meir's opinion. Reb Meir is the opposing opinion, who says that you would be unable to stand in Rishus HaYachid and move things around in Rishus HaRabim. And we're saying that you're unable to stand in Rishus HaYachid and drink in Rishus HaRabim. So it sounds like that's Reb Meir. So what's the deal? Why is the ratio of the Chachamim and the Sefer Reb Meir? Rav Yosef b'chfitzin shetzrichin lo v'divrei akol. So Rav Yosef says, no, even the rabbis would agree with this, because when it comes to things that you need, such as water, so then we're concerned that you might bring it to where you are. And therefore, even the rabbis would say, do not stand in Rishus HaYachid and drink in Rishus HaRabim, lest you come to take the kli with the water to where you are in Rishus HaYachid. Ibailu, they ask Akasha, Carmelis Mai. What about a Carmelis? If you're standing on a Carmelis, right? It's 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, less than 10 tefachim tall. So you're standing on a Carmelis, and right, it's between, I think, 3 tefachim and 9 tefachim. You're standing on a Carmelis, and the water is in Rishus HaYachid or Rishus HaRabim. Can you drink in this situation from a Carmelis to a Rishus HaYachid or Rishus HaRabim? Abaye says it's the same thing. There's no difference. No, you cannot stand on a Carmelis and drink in Rishus HaYachid or Rishus HaRabim. Says Rava. He says, look, I think the Mitaka had the same exact machlokas in Masechet Shabbos. Right? Rava says, look, it itself is a gzera. Now we're going to make a gzera on a gzera. What's it itself? Meaning what's the reason why you can't carry from a Carmelis to Rishus HaYachid or to Rishus HaRabim? It's a gzera. We're concerned that if you can carry from a Carmelis to Rishus HaYachid or to Rishus HaRabim, you might end up carrying from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim and vice versa. Right? So, therefore we say don't carry from a Carmelis to either Rishus. Now, when it comes to our case of drinking, right? If you're standing in Rishus HaYachid and you want to drink in Rishus HaRabim, that's also a gzera, right? Don't stand in Rishus HaYachid and drink from Rishus HaRabim, lest you come to take something from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid. So, now if we apply that to a Carmelis, right, and we're saying don't drink from a Carmelis to Rishus HaYachid, lest you come to take the thing from, let's say, the Rishus HaYachid and bring it into the Carmelis, which it itself is a gzera, lest you come to actually bring from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. It's 2 layers of gzeras, and we're not going to make 2 layers of gzeras. We make a gzeras that you don't come to do something else, which in and of itself is only gzeras that you don't come to do something else. Right? So Rava is not too excited about too many gzeras. So Abaye says, look, I'll tell you where I could prove it from, that we would say that you may not stand on a Carmelis and drink from Rishus HaYachid or Rishus HaRabim. Because the Mishnah at the very end says, and similarly in a wine press. What's the point of saying this similarly in a wine press? So the point is that, meaning even if the wine press is a Carmelis, then do not be drinking from it. Rava Amar, Linyan Meiser. Rava says, oh, that? V'chein begas? V'chein begas is saying that the same thing applies to Meiser, right? That when it comes to a wine press, so you have all this juice in the wine press, so as long as you drink it arai, temporarily, not in a kavua way, not in a fixed way, so as long as you drink it arai, so then you can, you don't need to take trumas and meisers, okay? Now, what's considered arai? So it's considered arai if you always drink it over the wine press. But if you take it out from the wine press, that's already considered kavua, and you'd have to take trumas and meisers. So the same thing applies here also, right? If you stick your head, right? So don't stick your head over the wine press and drink unless you have rosho verubo. So, v'chein amar Rav Sheshes, and similarly said Rav Sheshes, v'chein begas, linen meiser, that when it says similarly for a wine press, it's talking about meiser, ditnan, as we learned in the Mishnah, shosen ala gas, that you're allowed to drink over a wine press, bein bechamen uvein betzonin, ufater, divrei Meir, that you'd be allowed to drink the grape juice, essentially, from this wine press, and as Josh Fleet pointed out when we learned it in Masechta Shabbos, that it can be extremely sweet at that point. So you might want to cut it with some water. Now, there's a nafkamina between hot water and cold water. If you cut it with the hot water, if you mix it together with hot water, well, then you'd be unable to put it back with the rest of the juice. But if you dilute it with cold water, you can always pour it back afterwards if you need it. So therefore, maybe there's a havmina to say that if you use hot water, it's considered kavua, since you wouldn't be able to put it back. You're like making you're committing to drink this, to drinking this. So Reb Meir says, bein b'chamin, bein b'tzonin. Right, that you'd be allowed to dilute this grape juice, whether with cold water, whether with hot water, and you wouldn't have to separate trumas and maasros. Rabbi Eliezer bar Tzadik mechayev. Rabbi Eliezer bar Tzadik says, no, you can't cut it at all. If you want to drink it, I guess, directly, when it's, without changing it at all, so that would be considered a rye, and you wouldn't have to take trumas and maasros. V'chacham omrim, alacham and chayev alatonin pater. The chacham say, if you cut it with hot water, well, then that's considered kavua, since you can't put it back, and then you have to take trumas and maasros. But if you use cold water, so then you can be patur mipnei shemachzor samosar, because whatever's left over, you can always just pour back, so it can still be considered temporary. So Rava says that when it says v'chein begas, it is regarding the wine press. That as long as you have not taken the wine out of the wine press, so then it would be acceptable. Nu Mishnah call it Adam mina mazchila lematam yud tfachim hu mina tzinor mikomakom shose. So if you have a house, okay, now a house can have two different like gutter kind of systems for removing water from the roof. So one system is that you have like I guess like a gutter from the top, and it just, I guess they kind of have things like that in Jerusalem actually. Right, you have like these mirpesets on like the roof, let's say, because they used to have flat roofs, and also in Jerusalem they, I don't know, some places have flat roofs, and you like, let's say if you're like sponging on the roof, so then, or even if it's just raining, so then there'll be like holes on the side of the roof, and then the water can kind of go. Usually there's like some kind of hose, and it kind of just goes down to the street, so you got to be careful when you're walking. But over here we're talking about there's some kind of, I don't know, board or something, and then all of the water goes from the floor of the roof out some kind of hole onto like some kind of board that's on like a downward angle, and then it'll drop down to the street below. But that doesn't go down, meaning the board itself is just kind of like more or less straight towards the top on a slight angle, slight decline, but it's not going vertically down to the ground, which would be the other type of thing, which I guess is similar to like, I don't know, probably the gutters right outside my window. It kind of collects the water from the roof and then just goes straight down the side of the house and releases the water like by the floor. So the Reisha is talking about the gutter that's kind of towards the roof, whereas the Sefer is talking about the gutter that goes all the way down to the ground. So I think one was called a gutter and the other one was called a I can't remember the technical word that they use, but one of them is like, horizontal and the other one's like vertical. So call it adam in a mazchila. So the mazchila is the horizontal one, the one that's kind of like near the roof. So a person would be able to like take his cup and put it below the mazchila, and any water that is zochel, any water that flows down, you can just kind of capture it in your cup. Right, lematam yud tfachim, lower than 10 tfachim from the ground. Okay, minat tzinor mikomakum shose. But from the tzinor, from this pipe, maybe that's what it is, a pipe. From this pipe that goes all the way down to the ground, right? So then you can even like put your cup directly on the pipe, right? Because it's right next to the ground, and that would be acceptable. Fine. It says the Gemara, kolate in of a mitzarif lo. So now the Mishnah is saying that when it comes to this mazchila, when it comes to this like gutter towards the roof, so you would be allowed to stick out your cup and receive the water that's flowing down from the gutter, but you would be unable to take your cup and like, connect it to the gutter, or even put your mouth like up against the gutter and just drink directly like that, because that would be, so I don't know why, so let's see what the Gemara says. So, Amr Rav Nachman says, Rav Nachman hacha b'mazchila pachis migimel samach legagas. So Rav Nachman says, here we're talking about this gutter that is within 3 tfachim of the roof. Now, of course, the roof is a rishus hayachid, and because this gutter is within 3 tfachim of the rishus hayachid, it will be considered like the rishus hayachid. Techo pachis migimel samach legag kegag dami. That anything that's within 3 tfachim of the roof is like the roof. Now the roof is a Rishus HaYachid, and he's standing in Rishus HaRabim, so if he takes his kli and like puts it directly next to this gutter, it's going to be ki'ilu, he's taking something from Rishus HaYachid into Rishus HaRabim. But if he just kind of sticks out his glass and lets the gutter, flow down, and then he'll catch it, so then that would be acceptable. Taninam Yachid, we also learn in a brayso like this, Omid Adam Rishus HaYachid, Umagbi Yadu L'mayla Me'asara Tfachim, L'fachos M'shlosh Samuch L'gag, V'kolet. Right, so we have a brisa that says that if you have, Rashi explains that it's talking about like a roof, like 2 layers of roof. So Omer Adam Rishus HaYachid, so you could send a Rishus HaYachid, so that Yachid could be like a roof. And then he could lift up his hand to above 10 tfachim, lefachos mishlosha samach legag, to within 3 tfachim of like some other roof that is like, I guess, 1 story above him. V'kolet, and he can let the gutter kind of flow into his cup. Right? Meaning, like, it'll be like a little bit of a drop into his cup and he'll catch it. As long as he doesn't put it directly under the other roof, because that other roof will be Rishus HaYachid. But then won't he be in a Rishus HaYachid himself? Yeah, but maybe since it's his friend's roof, so then it's like and they didn't make an Eruv together, so that maybe that's why it wouldn't be allowed. So if you collate, but you'd be allowed to kind of catch it in the air, as long as you don't mamish put it next to the roof, because then it'll be like taking from his roof, and that wouldn't be allowed. Tani idach, we learn another brayso, lo yamid adam b'shus hayachid v'yagbi hayadu l'mayla me'asar tfachim lefachos migimel samach l'gag v'yitzarif. A person should not, let's read that again, lo yamid adam b'shus hayachid, a person should not stand in Rishus HaYachid, and Rashi is saying it's talking about a roof, v'yagbi hayadu l'mayla me'asar tfachim lefachos migimel samach l'gag, and put his, raise up his hand above 10 tfachim to within 3 tfachim of the next level of roof, v'yitzarif, and kind of put the cup touching that like gutter roof thing. Have a kole to v'shosa, but he'd be allowed to catch it in midair and drink. Okay. Minatzinor mikol makom shose, from the pipe, right, the pipe that goes all the way down to the ground, well then that would be no problem, right? Whether you want to put your glass directly, touching it or catch it makes no difference, because it's already within Rishus HaYachid anyways, right? It goes down to the ground. You're in Rishus HaYachid, it's in Rishus HaYachid. Tana, but we learn in a brayso, im yesh betzino daled al daled, but if the pipe is 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, well then you'd be unable to, kind of touch your glass to it, because if it's 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, then it's a karmelis, and then you're taking from a karmelis to Rishus HaRabim, which would not be okay. Nu Mishnah bor b'Rishus HaRabim v'chulyaso gavoa miyud tfachim. So if you have a pit that is in Rishus HaRabim, and the dirt that you dug out of the pit is around the pit, and it is 10 tfachim tall, chalon shal gabav, and then you have a house right outside this pit, and there's a window that is above it, mimalin emenu b'Shabbos, you'd be able to fill up like water from this pit on Shabbos. And the Gemara is going to explain what we're talking about. Ashba b'Rishus HaRabim, if you have a garbage heap in Rishus HaRabim, gavoa yud tfachim, and it's 10 tfachim tall, so it's a Rishus HaYachid, chalon shal gabav, and there's a window above it from a house, which is also Rishus HaYachid, shofchin l'socha mayim b'Shabbos, and you can pour water from the house, which is a Rishus HaYachid, onto the garbage heap, which is also Rishus HaYachid. Says the Gemara, b'maya skinon. What are we talking about with this pit? Ilema b'smucha, if we're talking about that the pit, which is a Rishus HaYachid, is right next to this house, and there isn't dalet tfachim between it, well then, lama li chulia yud. How come I need the side? Like how come I need the banks of the pit, the dirt that was dug out of it that are now banked around it, right? Even without, if it's close to the window, so then there's no Rishus HaRabim in between, so then I don't need the dirt that's piled up around the pit. I can just transfer directly from one Rishus HaYachid to another Rishus HaYachid without any Rishus HaRabim in the middle. So Rav Huna says that we're talking about where the pit is 4 tfachim away from the wall of the house. And the reason why you'd be allowed to fill up the water from the pit is because there is this side, the dirt banked up around the side that is Rishus HaYachid, and therefore there's no Rishus HaRabim in the middle. Haleka chulya asar, but if there wouldn't be this bank around the pit, then you'd be carrying from a Rishus HaYachid, let's say the pit, into another Rishus HaYachid, which is your house, and by way of Rishus HaRabim, and that wouldn't be allowed. Rabbi Yochanan says you could even say that it's talking about a pit that is close to the house. Well, if that's the case, then why do I need the bank? What it's saying is the bor v'chulyasu mitzdarfen la'asara. Rabbi Yochanan says that what the Mishnah is talking about is not a pit that is 10 tfachim deep. The pit itself is maybe 5 tfachim deep, but the dirt that you dug out of it and banked up around it gives it another 5 tfachim depth, height, depth, I guess, of the pit. So that's the point. So meaning the pit alone is not 10 tefachim deep, but the dirt that is piled up around it makes it 10 tefachim deep, and it is right next to the house, and therefore you'd be allowed to draw water from this pit on Shabbos. If you have a garbage heap in the Rishus HaRabim, you'd be allowed to pour things out of your window onto the garbage heap, because the garbage heap is a Rishus HaYachid and your house is a Rishus HaYachid. Are we not concerned that maybe some of the garbage is going to be removed and then it won't be a Rishus HaYachid anymore, right? Maybe it'll be less than 10 tefachim, in which case you'll be pouring from Rishus HaYachid to either a Carmelis or to Rishus HaRabim. So ve'amar Ravin bar Rav Ada amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Ravin bar Rav Ada said the name of Yitzchak, and this is a Gemara that we saw on Daf Ches. Ma'aseh b'mavui echad. There was a story with a mavui that there was a Rishus HaRabim, and you enter into this mavui from the Rishus HaRabim. Now, when you enter into this mavui, shetzido echad kala layam v'tzido echad kala la'ashpa. That when you turn into this mavui, instead of having a wall to your right and a wall to your left, you had the sea to your right, and you had a garbage heap to your left. Those were the two walls. The sea, which had, a bank of 10 tefachim, and you had a garbage heap, which was 10 tefachim tall. And then ahead of you, are two openings that go into two chatzers. And this question came in front of Rebbe, like, can we treat this as a mavui? Can we make a shitufim mavos and carry over there? And he didn't want to say that it's allowed, and he also didn't want to say that it's not allowed. Heter lo amar bo, he didn't say that it's permitted, because we're concerned that what happens if the garbage heap gets taken away, and then you lose that wall? Or what happens if the sea gets filled up with like dirt and the bank is no longer 10 tefachim? So in which case you lose those walls. So therefore he was unwilling to say that it's permitted as a mavui, because you can't, even though it's a mavui today, it may not be a mavui tomorrow. Isser lo amar, but he also didn't want to say that it's aser lo amar bo the kayam and mechitzas, because today the mechitzas are there, so technically it's permitted. So he wasn't really, he didn't really give an answer. So what do we see? So Rebbe wasn't willing to say that it's permitted, since we have to be concerned that maybe the garbage heap will be taken away. So why aren't we concerned about that in our Mishnah? Lo kasha ad yachad ad Rabbim. So the Gemara says it's no problem. Our Mishnah, where it says that you can assume that it's going to be there, is talking about a ashba shel Rabbim, a public garbage dump. You can expect that it'll be there for a while. But if it's a private one, it might go away. Fourth and final Mishnah of the day. Ilan shaya mesach ala aretz. If you have a tree that it was a very interesting tree that its branches would then droop over, and you can sit under, it almost creates like a fort, like a hut. So if the branches reach to the ground within 3 tefachim of the ground, well then you can carry in this under this tree. If the roots of a tree are higher than the ground, 3 tefachim, do not sit on them, because then it'll be like you're using a tree, and we know that you're not allowed to use a tree on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, that if this tree and its branches droop down to within 3 tefachim, we say you're allowed to carry there. However, if this area is larger than a beis ha'asayim, well then you would be unable to carry more than dalet amos under the tree, even if you specifically planted this tree to be able to sit under, to carry under, i.e. ledira. My time, how come? Mishum da'ave dira shetashmisha la'avir. This was a Gemara that we learned about on Daf Tesvav, I believe, that it will be a I think that's where we said it was. It will be a dira shetashmi, or was it yurches? Shetashmisha la'avir. It's really only planted there for the people who are working in the fields, who are guarding the fields, to give them shade from the sun. Right, meaning it's made for not really for living, but just for protection from outside elements. And therefore, if it's a when you have a deer that's something that's built just for the outside, to protect you from the outside, so you cannot carry more than if it's more than a beis ha'asayim, you'd be unable to carry more than dalet amos. That was daf 99 of Masechta Ayruvin. We talked about a whole bunch of things. Some of the sugyas that we talked about was drinking from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. We had a machlokas there between Abaye and Rava about drinking from a Carmelis to Rishus HaYachid or Rishus HaRabim. Abaye says that just like between a Rishus HaYachid and a Rishus HaRabim, it's also from a Carmelis to a Rishus HaYachid or Rishus HaRabim would be also. Rava says that we don't make a Gzeira L'Gzeira, and therefore you would be able to drink from a Rishus HaYachid, from a Carmelis to Rishus HaYachid or Rishus HaRabim. We talked about collecting water from gutters, and so if it's within 3 tefachim of the roofs, then you should just kind of grab it from the air. Do not like put it up against the gutter. But if it's a pipe that goes down to the Rishus HaRabim, so then you'd even be able to put your glass against the pipe as long as the pipe isn't 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, which would make it a Carmelis. Then we talked about if you have a pit that is within. That if you have a pit that's in Rishus HaRabim and you have the dirt around it, so Rav Huna said it's talking about a pit that is more than 4 tefachim away from the house, and without the area, the dirt stacked up around it, it would be going from Rishus HaYachid, the pit, to another Rishus HaYachid, the house, by way of Rishus HaRabim, and it wouldn't be allowed. But the dirt stacked up around the pit is which is 10 tefachim, is what makes it allowed to take from the pit on Shabbos. Rabbi Yochanan says that it's the chiddush over here is just saying that the depth of the pit and the height of the bank around it would join together to create this Rishus HaYachid of the pit, and it's talking about where the pit is close to the house. That was Daf Tzadi Tes. Hope you enjoyed it. Peace out.